So let's start one more great session during this wonderful conference. And it's a big pleasure for me to introduce Ron de Brita. Ron de Brita, educator and specialist in nonviolence communication, and do a lot in her field around this topic. Ron, would you like to add something for my words about you?
Thank you, Vilja. No, that's perfect. I actually put a bit of introduction into my talk around how I came to nonviolent communication and what it's done to help me live more fully. So, yeah, thank you. And I mean, that for me, just like with embodiment, it's something I want to bring into my life every day with all of what I meet. So thank you. I shall begin.
Yeah.
So the title of this is Peace Within Myself, because I want to put the idea that when I'm at peace in myself, then I can see the world as possible and I can bring my peacefulness to whatever's around me. So another title could be How to Embody Nvc, because I want to bring embodiment into it, obviously. So I'm going to begin with a couple of quotes from Marshall Rosenberg, who's the founder of nonviolent communication. At the root of every tantrum and power struggle are unmet needs. And another quote is, as we learn to speak from the heart, we are changing the habits of a lifetime. So what is compassionate communication, as I call it, about? So before I discovered NVC, I communicated to get something I wanted, to argue a principle, maybe to look clever, to show my interest and explore thoughts. I was all up in my head. Marshall Rosenberg describes it as a language of life, of living compassion. And so to imagine living with compassion, a way to connect with other people, that sounded very rich. It took a lot of practice to begin to be able to bring it into my life more often. And so the purpose of nonviolent communication is to discover how can we meet our needs without judgment, blame, or criticism. Discovering NVC brought me from my head into my heart and opened me to a deeper realization of my emotions and being more comfortable with my feelings and needs. This was entirely new. It came to me at a time of grief and pain when I really needed to find out about compassion and how to receive as well as to give. Living compassion. Obviously, an immeasurable gift was one I got from Mark Walsh's Embodied Facilitator course, which deepened and broadened my awareness and choice. And so those two practices of NVC and embodiment really have enriched my life beyond anything I could have imagined. I'm going to just put up a slide for you right now. And hopefully it should appear. Okay, so that's just a slide introducing the way, the intention of NVC. To create a quality of connection with oneself and others that leads to everyone's needs being met through mutual giving from the heart. I find that very beautiful and inspiring. So that's what I really want to share through this talk. So I'm going to introduce a little bit about me so that you get an idea of who I am. I was born in the UK a year after my parents arrived from Trinidad, descended from at least 3 generations of Indian and West African slaves. Enslavement. There's something in me that has a fierce determination to advocate freedom, choice, and fairness. Somehow, my innate enthusiasm and spirited interests and abilities were subdued as I grew older. To get approval and safety, I learnt to fear. And gradually, my potential for a vibrant, sparkling growth and development became a slide into repression, shutting down my own feelings and responses, my objections, my rage, my longings to be accepted, affirmed, and appreciated. The only outlet was academic ability. So I thought that was what life was all about. And I managed to do okay with it. You know, I studied biochemistry and I managed to get good grades. With this particular one type of intelligence, and yet I felt it all had to mean something, but I felt confused because all my qualifications seemed disconnected from meaning and purpose. I had no idea what to do with myself. I was brilliant at abstract analyzing and judging, but I felt numb and blank, dissatisfied and disconnected. My emotions were dissociated and I was frustrated and stressed. Even so, the origins of my work on embodied compassion began around this time when I was teaching in UK schools and tutoring children. And I realized that my deep understanding about what children needed in order to learn with ease and fun came from my own unmet needs. I took away pressure by never talking about targets and grades. I really didn't enjoy seeing students pushed to cram knowledge into their heads or feel stupid if that didn't fit with them. So I worked to make learning fun, accessible. All the children were different and they all brought unique abilities. So I started with their strengths and interests. Some were scared of getting the answers wrong and not getting their grade. I noticed that the power and support they needed to deal with difficult things came from the way they approached something that they loved doing. My students and their parents needed me to show them I appreciated the whole person and understood their blocks. So that was empathy right there. And that's what we're going to practice today. I had a couple of mottos. One was, if you're worried and anxious, you can't learn because your brain shuts down. So I really emphasized relaxing all the time and the importance of the child. Another one was, when you tell people what they must do, it diminishes their sense of freedom and choice. And those are basic human needs, fantastic and vital for learning. So I actually never told them what to do. I made it an invitation to show them things. As well as that, I was actually practicing a lot of embodied skills I came to realize years later. Respect and acceptance, attention. I actually used to figure out how to work with the child by watching their eyes, watching their hands, watching how they moved, noticing their voices, their facial expressions. And I actually learned to lower my voice so they had more space, so they could be the leader and they could take charge. And I think very much all of these things are still very much alive in me right now. It felt really important to me that they took charge of what they were learning and not me. I celebrated everything. And of course, I would say to them when they did something that was really good, I'd say, well, I did nothing. You did it all. I really enjoyed their freedom. And it was relational. If I wasn't at peace in myself, they couldn't learn. So self-regulation really matters. And those are things I was doing more than 20 years ago, before I came across the joy of embodiment with Mark and everyone else. There's one more thing that I'd like to affirm that was important to me then, that I've learned a lot more about since I've been training with embodiment. This consciousness of the mind and the body in dialogue with each other. The mind is thinking, the body is sensing, and they're already in connection with each other. We're learning to become conscious of this amazing connection. And that to me is just magical. I've always been interested in kindness, compassion, and space. And I realized that doubt, uncertainty, fear, and stress bring anxiety, and they really need attention. So, what I want to share with you today is how we transform when we're in difficulty, how to come into a peaceful way of being that's actually accessible, And we need a compassionate way to be available when we find ourselves in a tough situation. And for me, embodying is essential to bring the language more alive. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a little slide. What happened? Okay. Just come back to the Zoom picture again, if I can. Right, I might need a little bit of help from my tech support here to come back into the, yes, to come back into here. Okay, thank you. And share that slide. Okay, so this slide, okay, I'll show you a different one. Okay, and that's lovely. So this slide tells you about the aims of what we're doing this morning. So we're practicing embodying NVC, or compassionate communication. So we're going to look at what are the intentions of NVC. They are for authentic expression, speaking my truth, and for empathic receiving, I can hear you. And we'll look at the 5 components of NVC. We'll explore how our bodies react with challenging stimuli. And we'll meet something that Marshall Rosenberg introduced as Jackal language, and take some responsibility for how we are when we're in a difficult experience. I'm going to talk a lot about slowing down and creating space and attention to focus within. The embodied practice that I'm really interested in right now is focusing. So we'll hear more about that later. And hopefully you will take away some practices that will keep NVC alive. Okay, so are there any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to go straight into the structure of NVC. Okay, so for me, focusing within is really, really important throughout the steps. And I'm going to work with this later on grounded presence and awareness at every stage. Now, here are the steps that Marshall Rosenberg introduced. And the first one is making observations without judgments. So instead of saying something about the person that did something that you don't like, you just say when this thing happened. The next stage of NVC is about feelings. So I'm going to invite us, of course, to think about these feelings as embodied sensations. So when my body did something, I call it a feeling of whatever. The third step of compassionate communication is needs, because our body does this feeling to let us know what we need. And that's what's so fantastic about it, that we know what we need because our body's telling us that. And the last step is to make a request that's not a demand. Something like, would you be willing to help me do this? When we speak in this way and we say to other people, do you know, I was really feeling like, I felt really sad when that happened. This doesn't provoke objection or defense or counterattack. People are really happy to hear what our feelings are. And this is what's so fantastic about NVC. Because when you give a genuine feeling, people hear that quite differently. And this is what fosters connection. And that's what it's all about, forming a connection. There does need to be a choice here. And very often when Marshall was training and people said, well, I tried NVC, but it didn't work because they said no. But of course, that's really important, that the other person has a choice about helping with whatever it is you need. And it really helps to be able to hear a no, because the person might be saying yes, to a particular need of theirs. So we're going to explore some of these things right now. Thank you. Now, violence and conflict usually come about as a result of a stimulus or a challenge in words or actions. And how we respond to that is this place of choice for either peace or for not peace. And that choice needs some space and consideration. Here's a quote from Marshall. He says, "I wouldn't expect someone who's been injured to hear my side until they felt I'd fully understood the depth of their pain." And this is a huge example of how to begin with what is provoking us and causing the reaction in ourselves. So one place to begin is with what's driving you crazy. What really annoys you? What brings up annoyance, irritation, frustration, upset? What stops you from feeling happier? If I know what's going on in me and I can experience that in my body, and then when I can have compassion for that in myself, then I can bring my attention to the other person and hear them and give them some empathy. So I'm going to invite you now to just reflect on something that might have happened for you in the last 24 hours or the last few days. Something that provoked a reaction in you. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10 in intensity, where 10 is the most intense and 1 is the least intense, would you think of something that's about 3 to 5 in intensity so that you sense a reaction, but not something that's far too overwhelming for you to cope with being on your own? Okay. So, would you be willing to send a little note in the chat? Have a little think about something that really wasn't particularly pleasant for you, and then maybe add this note. What did your body do? Okay, so it's just a reflection and putting a note into the chat. So either everyone's had a really peaceful few days, they've been so busy on the conference. Here we've got jaw clenched, feeling breath a little shorter. Okay, so one of them is an observation of what happened. But what do you feel? Natasha, I'm curious about what is the response in your body when you notice this? Tightness in the chest. Tension in the stomach, the jaw and the stomach, tight and shallow breath, the heart racing. The spasm of a muscle. Ear ringing, palpitations. So I'm really noticing how people's bodies are responding to difficult circumstances. Thank you so much for your replies. A tight jaw, stop breathing. That's one I identify with a lot for myself. Talking faster. Yeah, thank you so much. So here's the body's response, and we know there's a problem, and these things are really common, and we all are familiar with when these things show up in our lives. Well, what we normally do when we notice this stimulus from the other person, we very often bypass those difficult feelings and those sensations that you've described. And we go into our heads and we start rationalizing so that we can be right. And Marshall used to say, which game do you want to play? The game of how can we make life more wonderful, or the game of who's right? That's a very difficult place to be. And yet this way of responding is quite understandable. Our brains work for analysing and judging, but if we judge ourselves as not right, the path usually leads us to a habitual pattern, and that is to push the offending stimulus away, such as in fight, or run away from it, as in flight. When fight or flight are not available, perhaps because of repression, the pattern that arises is shut down or freeze, where the person may seem to do nothing. And fold or collapse is also possible. And when all these things are happening in our bodies, we've got no space to give attention to our feelings and be with how we are. So I'm repeating this, our feelings are actions that our body is doing, and then we give a word to them. And it's really important, vital, that we allow ourselves to sense these responses and allow that discomfort of not being right, of being hurt. The consequences of the habitual patterns tends to not be peaceful. The other person is viewed as being wrong or bad. Marshall talked about this as enemy images, and there's more pain. And this is very often what we're running away from allowing the pain to be there in us and acknowledging it. The brain dismisses the pain and says, well, let's do something. But the body's wisdom can get a bit lost in this thinking, and we have a story. I'll look weak if I give in. My status is important. I don't want to look bad. So thank you for giving your attention to what your body's doing. So I'm noticing some lovely comments in the chat. I'm going to move now to owning and taking responsibility for these difficult experiences. Another quote from Marshall: we are dangerous when we're not conscious of our responsibility for how we behave, think, and feel. So from the place of tension that you've described and that I've experienced, peaceful communication is less possible. Tension tends to narrow our perception, so we either don't register or only register our own irritation and tone of voice, and perhaps override the other person's hurt experience. We really can't have a conversation to resolve hard feelings when we're in the middle of being upset. We can't, because we can't be clear about what we want, and the other person can't really see or connect to us very well. And we're blocked from this open communication by the learnt belief that we're feeling horrible because of what the other person said. Actually, we're feeling horrible because our body's response to the stimulus is pain and tension. So when we receive this offense or attack or disrespect, our heads go straight to control. This is something I learnt with Wendy Palmer, that the head goes to control to try to get rid of that bad feeling. So here's a question that I'd love to hear some chat back about. What do you do to control the situation you don't like? So when some of these things happen, what action do you take? What do you do to say, I just don't want to hear this. I don't feel okay. Your body's doing all that work, and usually there'll be something that happens. So please take a moment to think about, what do you normally do when something really unpleasant occurs and you can't tolerate it? How do you take control? Walk away. Demand the other person changes their behavior. Talk a lot. Withdraw. Freeze. Thank you. Yeah. feel the inner tension and anger, ignore the person, collapse and cut off, wait instead of responding, put the focus on the other person, see if they can feel some of my discomfort. Yeah, that's really a common one. This is how much I'm hurting. You can see that now because I'm going to put that onto you. Lash out at others. Yeah. Lawrence distracts himself with housework. Try to center or remove the stimulus. Oh, it's grumpy housework. Yeah. Take a step back by breathing and say, I need a timeout or a moment to think about it. That's pretty much what I'm going to talk about right now. How do we deal with that? So thank you so much for your beautiful responses here. I'm now going to show you another slide. And I'm going to introduce you to Marshall Rosenberg's Jackal. Anyone who's ever seen a video of Marshall will notice that he would show up with a puppet. And this jackal does represent a part of ourselves that's trying to meet our needs for comfort and safety and protection from fear and pain. So when we're in a bad situation, Marshall would talk about, being in a jackal state. The trouble is with the jackal is these are the words that it says. So it tends to just say, ouch, with judgments. You're bad, you're wrong. Labels like you're stupid and untidy. Blame and fault finding. I've got no choice. Criticism, threats and demands. Punishments and rewards. Because of course, even rewards are a way of me judging you and saying, well, I judge that you've been really good. And that's not really very helpful for people's hearts to know that I've judged them as being good. Comparing, I'm not good enough. Manipulation. So connecting with this jackal part of ourselves, it might seem like the violent part, but until we connect with it, we haven't really got a chance to step away from it. Because as soon as we try to step away from that jackal, it starts shouting again. No, I hate this. It's horrible. Take it away. Don't do this to me. And so being with the jackal is the way we can take responsibility for how we're feeling. Because it's easy to blame the other person. Look, you did this. Look what you did. I hate it when you say that. And the trouble is when the person hears those things, they can't help us. So when the blame goes to the other person, they really can't help, because they then find that your response becomes their stimulus. So now they're feeling really terrible. So when you've encountered these things, these judgments and labels and criticisms, so in that space where we step backwards, we could say, well, this is the jackal part of me. I understand that this part is trying to protect me. I get that what the jackal's saying sounds really awful to whoever's listening. And when they hear it, they feel hurt and tense, and now they can't hear me. So just a little request for you, which is, which of these particular types of jackal would you say that you do? So in other words, can you match some of the responses that you have to your own behavior when something happens that you don't like? I'll just leave the slide there while you do that. And then please put a little note in the chat that says jackal, and then one of those, which might be your way of coping at the time. Okay, I'm gonna, hopefully that's been okay. I can't see the chat at the same time as the slide, so I'm gonna stop sharing it. Yeah, some jackals have begun to arrive. Thank you. Is that okay, or would you like me to put the slide up again? Blame and criticism with partner. Yeah, rewarding animals. Yeah. I'm going to say to Ailsa, the film Taming Wild is about working with a horse without using anything, just body language. Punishments and rewards with children, yeah. Blaming. It's so easy to do because we've been practicing. Thank you. We've actually been, I'll put the jackal down now. We've been practicing these kinds of responses to control what we don't like for at least 8,000 years. And the consequences are those of domination cultures, where we have to do something a particular way to be accepted. The jackal expression is really better than bottling the feelings up and holding them inside of us. Because when we're carrying these really tough feelings in the body, we really need some protection and comfort and safety. And Western culture doesn't really approve of expressing this. It's labeled as whining and whinging, or of course it might result in destructive actions. Now, these feelings need attention before they get heavier and explode. And they can do that now, they can do it later, hours later, or years later. And they all sound like, you know, things that you've brought up. He said this, she did that, I'm furious, it's your fault, don't blame me. And this unprocessed pain can be unbearable. Thank you. So usually we go into our heads. And so let's come back now to the intention of Nvc. Okay. So the intention of Nvc is a compassionate language based on seeking connection. So instead of doing all of those things, be able to say, what's alive in me? How can we express authentically what's alive in me? And one way is to observe what happened without evaluating it. When you did this, I felt really uncomfortable, or I felt really hurt when you did that. So we're going to think now about some feelings words. And then I'm going to invite you to go into some chat rooms and talk about how you could say what happened, both in the Jackal way and how you could say it in a Nvc type of way. Okay, so now I'm going to move the slide to some feelings words. They're really helpful. It's important, and this is, for me, this is part of how the heart and the mind connect with each other. Feel the pain, and then come to the feelings words. So I am going to ask my host if they will put you into chat rooms of 4 people for 4 minutes. And when you're in the chat room, try to say or come up with a statement of, when this event happened, my body did this, and I call it this feeling. And while that's happening, so if each person has about a minute to speak, my invitation to the others is to listen and not to interrupt at all. So actually, if you're in a chat room and you've got some way of timing, maybe somehow to take 1 minute, so whatever you say, the others will be listening empathically and they won't say anything. So if you're ready to do that, that will be fantastic.
So the rooms will open now, and You'll get a little reminder a minute before they close. You don't have to click immediately on that button, but actually can take that minute to wrap up your conversation. All right. If you can currently not participate in a breakout room, that's absolutely fine. Take the moment, maybe give it a little shake, get up, get a coffee, get a water. Looks like everyone's back.
Very much.
Maybe also, as we found in the last calls, before we do a harvest of this, we could have people move a little bit, stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually,
that's exactly what's coming up right now. Thank you. So yeah, I do invite everyone. I'm certainly going to do that, to just move a little bit and stretch. Oh.
Let's shake, stretch, move your bodies, jump, dance.
Oh, thank you.
Breathe.
Oh, that's lovely. So, it'd be lovely just to hear a little bit of feedback on that. But I also want to move forward as well. So if anyone would like to offer a little bit in the chat, that's great. But if not, we're going to move forward with some other parts of NVC. So if there's something you'd like to share, please do so. That would be lovely. And in 30 seconds, I'm going to take us into a way to be with all of that. So here we are, and in the breakout group that I was in, there was a real consciousness of how unpleasant it is to have these difficult feelings in our bodies. And so my invitation is to create a great, wonderful space between the thought and the action we take in response. Maybe to visualize that space in some way. How would it look? Just a line between the words? I take a step back. Maybe a dancer leaping in midair before they land. Maybe a breath. because I really love this space, to create space between actions and reactions, between old habits and new choices, and allowing ourselves to feel more spacious, to take up space for this work of peace. Because when we're feeling confined, enclosed and small, it can generate huge amounts of resistance and rebellion. So we need space to come into the body for ourselves and to be able to hear the other person with attention. And we can practice spaciousness. And so I'm going to invite you to join me as I just talk through some things that help us. And that's some centering. I'm going to stand up because that works for me, if you can still hear me. So notice the ground under your feet or the chair that's supporting you. And know that every molecule in your body has come from that ground. And everything that you eat has come from that ground. Feel your weight and know that you're supported by the ground. And from the top of your head to the tip of your tail, notice the alignment in your spine as you're supported with the earth. Grounding and breathe the air. Maybe place your hands on your heart and your belly and breathe. And this brings our focus within, into our bodies. And it's how to begin to create self-connection, self-empathy, self-care, and self-responsibility over time. And these are embodied practices and compassionate practices that align beautifully together. Awareness. Be aware of what's inside you. Whatever the feelings are, allow them to be there. And sometimes this can be done by scanning the body, or maybe just noticing the core of the body, the jaw, the throat and chest, the belly and the pelvis. And notice whatever is coming up within. And sense what's around you, any sounds or smells, what's in the room around you, and what's beyond the room. Acceptance that this is as it is. All of this is here, and it's all fine. Here I am. Presence, gradually coming into presence and feeling all that's within you and around you. Noticing your body and sensations in this moment, your posture and breathing, the context that you're in. And the vital thing is be able to come back into presence again and again and again with whatever arises. Connect to your intention. To feel myself, this is my intention, to feel myself here in this moment with all of you, with self-love and care. Notice my own feelings. Sinking into my ground and breathing. Thank you for sharing that with me. This is one embodied approach to NVC, grounding, aware presence, creating space between the thought and the action. And in this space, there can be self-connection, empathic connection between the mind and the body. And this is where peace can start, in this pause before the reaction, in this stepping backwards, in this pause in midair. So in compassion for myself, no judging or criticizing myself or beating myself up. This is peace happening within. If I'm not at peace within myself, I can't tolerate the other person's actions. And I find myself all stirred up with hurtful thoughts and feeling pain. So pausing gives us a chance to connect to ourselves and choose what our response is going to be. So hopefully we've got some ideas now about how to respond by just saying what's alive in us. So we've had a go at saying, when this event happened, my body did this, and I call it this feeling. So the next part of NVC is to talk about needs. So I'm going to share a slide with you now. Let me just check it's the right one. Okay. So the third component of compassionate communication is needs. And we need, Marshall used to say, a different literacy for talking about our needs. It's come up in one of the other talks on this conference. It's not about being needy and seeing this as some kind of weakness, because all of our actions are driven by our needs. If we weren't needing nourishment, we wouldn't feel hungry, and we wouldn't then go and try to meet that need. So actually our needs are really important, because they're what's helping us to take care of ourselves in our lives. So I'm reminding you that we're talking about focusing within, expressing ourselves empathically, and also being able to listen to the other person. So our statement could now become, when this happened, my body did this action because I felt something, because I needed something. And then being able to say to the person, would you be willing to hear me, or to help me with something? So we can think about making requests that are not demands. Hope you can all see a slide which is called the Nvc Dance Floor. This was started by Bridget Belgrave and Gina Laurie. And imagine that these things that I've put here in boxes are just like put cards on the floor in steps. And very often what happens is we try to walk from observations to feelings, to saying our needs, and to saying what the request is. But mostly when people try to do that, they end up going backwards into the Jackal again, and then coming into grounded, aware presence. And so this is what my offer is today, that as well as observations, feelings, needs, and requests, not to mind if you've got to come back into the Jackal and into presence and self-compassion before you're really ready to talk to the other person. So what's really great is to do this with somebody who's practicing NVC and not the person who has done the action that really feels so hurtful, okay? Because that person's not really able to hear you when you're upset. So at the end, I'll put up a link to the Center for Nonviolent Communication, where you might be able to discover who's practicing NVC where you live. So in our state of grounded awareness, it's much easier then to ask for help with meeting our needs without the other person feeling hurt or unhappy. They're now more likely to be able to feel that they want to help us than if we'd been blaming them or judging them. So I'm noticing that I've got about 4 minutes left. So I'm just going to put up now a list of needs. These are universal human needs. And this is why connection comes from using this type of communication, because everyone has the same needs. So when we notice these needs in ourselves and maybe express them to another person, that person can understand that because they know what these needs are about, because they have the same needs. So this morning we've looked at how we can embody compassionate communication for ourselves. And for this to be a peaceful way in which we can connect to another person, let them know the truth of how we're feeling, what it is we're needing, and we can maybe request of them that they could help us in some way. things like when I noticed that your room was so untidy and there was stuff all over the floor, I felt quite anxious because I really need order and I also need respect and consideration. Would you be able to have a chat with me about this so that we can find a way to help each other here? So compassionate communication helps us to communicate with people without getting them to do what we want, but showing them what needs we're trying to meet and recognizing what needs they're trying to meet by the way that they're behaving. The possibilities are enormous. So we've had a look at how to connect with ourselves. We can imagine that little walkway from the jackal to the awareness to observations, feelings, needs and requests, all when we're trying to imagine what the other person is feeling, needing, and might request. So I'm really conscious that that we have got to the point of 55 minutes after the hour. So I'm going to close here with enormous gratitude to you all for coming, and ask Vilja to give the announcements.
Yes, thank you, Ron, for this great session. You know, every time when I meet Nvc and people from Nvc community, I notice my first thought, oh, it's very, very simple. It's easy to do. Bam, 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 bam. But when I try to do it, when I try to practice it, oh, it's not easy. It needs practice. So I have some announcement about what we have today and what other possibilities we have during this conference. First will be about our partner charity. It's a queer facilitator course in Russia for LGBTQ community. And as a part of this course, I will be very happy if you join our movement and express your support for not easy things that we have in Russia with this question. So yeah, I see the link. So thank you very much, Christine. Another opportunity during the conference, we have a sales package, and it's all the recordings that will be available after the conference, and you can find it following the link in the chat. And what we have today is a great day, and it's only the beginning. So the next session will be a session of Christopher Gladwell, Find Awareness and Delight as you experience the Nagas, and it will be about yoga. Next session with the great coach Abudi Shabi. And please be attentive. This call starts 30 minutes later than usual. And it will be why does the body matter in coaching? Yakov and Susanna Darling-Hahn, embodying power, responsibility, and creativity around dance at 4 p.m. UK. And next session will be Joel Levy, Wisdom at Work. And it will be about leadership. Next coaching session, Curtis Watkins, Embodied Transformation. And next, Derek Norman, founder of 12 Rivers Internal Arts, Embodied Learning through Classical Education in Traditional Arts. And next session, it will be midnight in UK, interview with Heather Manson, founder of the Minded Institute and director of the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance. At 2 a.m. UK, wow, Amber Elizabeth Gray, Right to Embody Dance Movement Therapy in Complex Humanitarian Contexts. And the last session of this day, it will be 4 a.m. UK, It will be pre-recorded interview with Doug Silsby, Presence and Death. So big day, a lot of beautiful session. Please stay with us and play with us. So back to the Ron. Ron, what is your top tip for staying embodied during conflicts and practice nonviolent communication?
Thank you, Vilja. My top tip for everyone is take some space, be with the feelings, notice what you need, allow it all to be there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ron. I'm happy to be on this session, and thank you all for being here and participating, and I hope Nvc technique, Nvc approach will be more and more common and well-known. Use it, practice. It's really great thing. Thank you very much all, and now we have 15 minutes for chat if you wish. Yeah, Christine?